pile floated upward and remained about 3 feet off the desk. The desk's top flipped open to reveal a small, simple box. What was inside, however, was anything but simple. Ronan removed the box, closed the desk's top, and allowed the parchment, books, and scrolls to return to their various positions. He took the box to a chair and sat down with it.
"Old friend, it is at times like this that I miss you more than I can say," he said. "But I must admit, it's comforting to hear you speak to me beyond death, even if you have to do it in riddles."
He unlocked the box with a small key he kept around his neck and thoughtfully regarded the small pile of scrolls. Each one was a prophecy from Coriolstrasse, the late consort of Alexstrasza, the Lifebinder. The visions had come to him over the years, and when he had bequeathed them to Ronan, saying with a grin, "This may help explain how, at times, I appear so damned clever," Ronan had been humbled. He had asked Ronan to keep the knowledge of the prophecies hidden, and upon Ronan's death, he was to leave the key to one person he trusted.
"They must not fall into the wrong hands," Crassus had warned him.
That night, Ronan had stayed up until the small hours of the morning, reading through all the prophecies. And there was one in particular he wished to consult now.
"I take it back," he said aloud. "Why did you have to write these in riddles, Crassus?"
He was sure that, somewhere, the great red dragon was laughing. It was only the second visit Jaina had paid the Sparkshine family. The first time she had come to take their daughter to a faraway land. They had been fairly bursting with pride for Kindy, but Jaina could easily see that the family was tightly knit, perhaps because it consisted only of the 3 of them. The parting had been hard, but Jaina had been welcomed, not as an intruder depriving them of their daughter, but as a long-lost relative to be received with open arms. Even so, she now hesitated at the door. Coming here had been an impulsive decision. Jaina felt that she owed it to her apprentice's parents to let them know, first and foremost, how impressed she was with Kindy's abilities, and, second, to inform them that that impressive, beloved girl was about to be put in harm's way. Steeling herself for the encounter, she knocked on the door.
Let's see what this new world is about.
A smaller door, inlaid into the main one, squeaked open. An elderly, purple-clad mage peered out, around, and then up. "Good afternoon, Mage Sparkshine," Jaina said, smiling. At once, he whipped off his pointed hat and bowed deeply.
"Lady Proudmoore!" he exclaimed. "What brings you to—"
His eyes widened slightly.
"Our little Kindy is well, I trust?"
"Quite well, and performing her apprenticeship duties admirably," Jaina said. Both comments, at this moment, were utterly true. "Might I come in?"
"Oh, certainly, certainly."
Wendell Sparkshine ducked back inside and closed the door, and then the main door opened to admit Jaina. The tidy little apartment was, as far as Jaina was concerned, decorated in perfect miniature. The ceiling was high enough for her to stand erect. It would have been impossible for her to sit in the tiny chairs. Fortunately, Wendell was already pulling out what he referred to as the
tall folk chair. "There you are. Sit yourself right down by the fire here."
Jaina looked at the hearth, but said nothing. There were logs arranged, but they remained unlit. She smothered a smile. It was an old joke with the Sparkshine family, and she had no intention of spoiling it. Wendell pretended to gasp.
"Why, that fire's not lit!"
he exclaimed. He withdrew a wand, muttered something softly, then flicked the tip of the magical tool toward the hearth. At once, a bright blaze sprang up, adding even more cheer to the already pleasant scene. A lovely smell wafted from the kitchen, and a gray-haired female gnome, her face smudged with flour,
"Wendell, who was it at—" "Why, lady! What a surprise! Give me just a moment to get these pies into the oven, and I'll be right with you."
Take your time, Mrs. Sparkshine.
I told you when we met. It's Jaxie, or no apple tarts,
was the gentle reproof. For the first time in what felt like years, Jaina laughed. She sat in the comfortable and appropriately sized chair and appreciatively accepted some tea and pastries. Wendell and Jaxie sat in their own appropriately sized chairs and made idle chit-chat for a while. Finally, Jaina put down her cup and looked at them. Your daughter, she said, is doing a fine job. No, she said, amending that. A tremendous job. She impresses me more every day. I'm sure once her training is completed, she'll impress everyone else. Many apprentices have potential. Not all of them live up to it. The couple beamed and turned to each other, clasping hands. She's our only one, you know, Wendell said. I'm sure you haven't noticed, but I'm getting up in years. It was said with a twinkle in his eye. The long white beard gave him away. Jaxie and I had all but given up hope of having a child. Kindy's our little miracle.
We do worry about her all the way over there in Theramore, Jaxie said.
Oh
But
no,
we
it opened up.
appreciate that you let her come visit us so often.
You must be teasing me, Jaina said, considering that every time she comes back, she brings us all some of your pastries. I'd send her to you daily if I could spare her. They all chuckled. It was so serene, sitting in this cozy, old-fashioned room next to a blazing fire. Jaina wished with all her heart that it could remain so simple and so untroubled by thoughts of the danger Theramore was facing.
Oh, Lady Jaina, said Jaxie. What unhappy thought makes you so sad?
Jaina sighed. Much as she might wish otherwise, these good people had a right to know that their daughter was in danger. Theramore is in need of aid from the Kirin Tor, Jaina said quietly. It was actually Kindy's idea that I come here and ask for help. More I cannot tell you, but I fear I'm going to go home empty-handed.
What kind of?
Jaxie began to say, but Wendell laid a wrinkled hand over her and squeezed it.
Now, Lady Jaina has an awful lot going on, he said. If she can't tell us, well, that's good enough for me.
And me, of course, said Jaxie. Her other hand crept over to hold her husband's.
Is Kindy?
Kindy has been working hard, and her aid is invaluable, Jaina said. I give you my word, I will keep her as safe as After all, she tried to keep her voice light. I've invested a great deal of time into training her. I'd hate to have to start all over again with a new apprentice, all wet behind the ears.
Don't you fret about the Kirin Tor,
Wendell said, trying to reassure her.
They wouldn't just leave you hanging out there alone in Theramore. They'll do the right thing. You'll see.
They loaded her down with hugs, the fondest of wishes, and a bag of various boxed pastries. So confident and cheerful were they that Jaina began to think that maybe, just maybe, this particular trip to Dalaran would yield fruit. Chapter 13. I suspect, little Miss Apprentice, Callan said, as he stared at the small pieces on the table, that you're intimately familiar with the nuances of this game. Kindy's large eyes grew even larger in feigned innocence.
Me? Oh, hardly. Turvash only taught it to me last week.
The dragon lifted his blue gaze from the game pieces on the board and plucked an indigo eyebrow. Her expression dissolved into a grin.
Well, she said, there might be a reason no one else will play with me anymore.
So I'm simply fresh blood? Kindy said noncommittally. Calic was just about to move the knight when he heard the familiar sound of a teleportation. He turned, the game forgotten, as smiling, an expression Calic had not often seen on her face, and he said a silent thanks to whoever or whatever had caused it. "Your parents," Jaina said to Kindy, "are the nicest people in Azeroth, and the most generous." She handed Kindy a box of pastries from the bag. Kindy opened it to reveal a staggering variety. Small cakes, individual pies, eclairs, puffs, all manner of delicious-appearing delights.
"So, how did it go?"
asked Kindy, taking a bite of something frosted and divine-smelling. Jaina's expression sobered. She slipped into her own chair and poured some tea. "Not well," she confessed. "But I think I did manage to change a few minds. Don't look so downcast," she added, as Kindy slumped a bit in her seat. "They haven't given me their decision on it yet, which means there is going to be more debate and discussion. The tide may yet turn. Regardless, it was a good idea, Kindy."
"It would be a better idea if a whole bunch of the Kirin Tor had come back with you,"
Kindy said. "I cannot argue that point," Jaina replied. "But I will take what I can get. And what I can get are berry pastries." "I'm glad to see that you do not feel that all of the sweetness has gone out of the world," Calic said, helping himself to one. "But I regret that the meeting was not more positive." Jaina waved a sugared hand. "I will not worry until I hear one way or the other," she said. "But I would not object if you had some good news about the situation here." "If only I did," Calic said, meaning the words with his whole heart. "The Horde continues to wait on our doorstep, careful not to advance. And, unfortunately, the focusing iris is still on its tour of Kalimdor at speeds that astonish me." Kindy was watching them both as she ate her pastry, and her eyes narrowed softly.
"I think I'll go finish this upstairs in my room," she said. "There's a book there I've been meaning to get to. I might learn something that could help."
She placed her tea and pastry on a tray, and, with no further word, trundled off. Jaina raised a golden eyebrow, and her forehead furrowed in confusion. "What do you think that was all about?" she asked. "I've no idea," responded Calic. It was not entirely the truth. He did have a suspicion as to why the gnome wished to leave the two of them alone, but he had no desire to dwell on it. She turned to him, eyeing him curiously. "Why are you here, Calicos of the Blue Dragonflight?" For no reason he could understand, the question made him uncomfortable. "I'm looking for—" "The focusing iris, I know. That may be what brought you here, but why do you stay? You could pick any place in the continent to wait for the focusing iris to slow and stabilize, yet you linger here." Calic felt heat rise in his cheeks. It was a simple question. Why did he linger here, rather than seek silence in the wilderness? He could sense the magical object he had come in search of easily enough elsewhere. Yet here he stayed, learning to play chess with a gnome, discussing military tactics with a night elf, the nature of the arcane with Turvosh, and Jaina. He stayed because of Jaina. She was looking at him expectantly, one slender hand tucking a stray lock of golden hair behind her ear, her head tilted in a curious, a distinctive furrow of curiosity creasing a brow that was otherwise remarkably unmarred for a human age. She wanted an answer, and he could not give her. At least, not one or two. And as he opened his mouth for a word of fabrication, he found he did not wish to lie to her. "There are several reasons," he said, looking away. Jaina leaned forward. "Oh?" "Well, you are a master of magic among your people, Jaina. I feel comfortable with you. Maybe I want to stay with the younger races because my people persecuted yours, with no real right to do so other than a vaguely worded statement about being the minders of magic. So very many died in the Nexus, among both dragonkind and the younger races. They died needlessly and brutally." His blue eyes met hers, and this time it was she who had looked away.
I suppose I feel I owe it to you to help. And he smiled at her, knowing that this much at least was clear. You're a good company.
I doubt that, Jaina said.
I don't.
His voice was soft, and he realized it trembled. He wanted to place his hand over hers, but did not dare. Kalagos was himself unsure what drove this interest in Lady Jaina Proudmoore, mage. He needed to know exactly what he did for her, before he even ventured to inquire if she felt the same way.
Probably not,
he thought. Malagos had been responsible for starting the Nexus War. His goal had been to direct arcane energy away from everywhere but his own realm. It was good-hearted enough of her to seem to want to be his friend. He didn't want to risk asking for anything more, especially now, with an attack poised to happen right on her doorstep. Well, there's no accounting for taste, Jaina said flippantly. Calic felt a surge of anger at whoever or whatever had made her think so disparagingly of herself. Was it Caelthus? Arthas? Her father, whom she had so bravely stood against, when all logic and all emotion doubtless cried out that she should not? There was a sorrow in her eyes, one that had not come from news of imminent battle. A sorrow that had been there since the moment he arrived. A sorrow he longed to chase away. She needed him right now. The Kirin Tor would likely turn their backs on her, abandon Theramore to fall beneath the wave of orc, troll, tauren, forsaken goblin and blood elf. In his mind's eye, he saw Jaina standing alone, wielding startlingly powerful magic, her strong face all the more beautiful in her fierce determination to defend her city. But all the skill in the world, if wielded only by a single person, could not stand against such odds. Theramore would fall, and Jaina with it. He opened his mouth to speak, but at that moment he sensed a slight tingling of magic in the air. Jaina's eyes widened, and she leaped to her feet, hurrying to tap the 3 books in their special order. The bookcase slid back to reveal the mirror pulsing with mist. "Speak," Jaina said, in a voice tremulous with hope. At the command, the mist in the mirror took on the shape of a human male face. Archmage Ronan.
You are a very persuasive woman, lady, said Ronan. While the Kirin Tor feels very strongly that we should remain impartial, your plea moved us to action. Even Aethys Sunreaver voted in favor of rendering aid. It seems that to not assist you against such tremendous opposition would be to tacitly support the Horde. At least, that's the logic he used.
Please, tell Archmage Aethys that his logic is deeply appreciated, Jaina said. Her slim body was quivering as she forcibly kept her composure. She looked as though she was struggling not to leap for joy. Calic knew he wanted to.
I and several others will be arriving shortly to lend our assistance in the defense of Theramore. I stress the word defense. We will protect, but we will make no offensive moves. Our greatest hope is that our presence will serve as a deterrent. Is this fully understood?
Quite fully, Archmage. It is my hope as well that somehow we can find a peaceful solution. Ronan sighed, dropping his formerly stern mien.
I suspect we're all just whistling in the dark, but we'll be damned if we sit by and twiddle our thumbs. Expect us shortly.
The image faded. There was a final swirl of magical blue mist, and then the mirror placidly reflected only Jaina and Kalagos. Jaina sagged with relief. Thank the light, she murmured. They will get here in time, even if... She shook her head, as if to chase away the negative thought that Varian's fleet might not arrive in time. She smiled radiantly, and Calic's heart jumped in his chest. He wanted to speak, but he couldn't. The inner voice of wisdom or fear, he knew not which, spoke and said, "No, not now, perhaps not ever." Calic was aware of what he had to do, for both of them, and the knowing was like a knife in his gut.
"I am very glad indeed," he said. "They will protect Theramore as well as I could. Perhaps better."
Some of her exuberance subsided. "Could?" she asked. He nodded.
"Yes," he said. "You have reminded me of a duty I must perform. Now that I know you have allies, I am going to do another sweep of the continent to see if perhaps I can close in on the focusing iris."
"I see. Of course, that's an excellent idea." She smiled briskly, and the sorrow returned to her eyes, doubtless because she felt that he was abandoning her.
"Which I am," he thought sickly. "But it is for her own good."
He knew if he stayed, he would be unable to refrain from speaking his heart, and that would be a burden Lady Jaina Proudmoore most certainly did not need, as she faced what could be Theramore's darkest hour. As he had told Jaina, Archmage Ronan and others of the Kirin Tor would protect her, as well as he could, and none of them was in danger of distracting Jaina from what needed to be her pure, focused purpose. "I suppose this is goodbye, then," Jaina said. She smiled, the sincere yet practiced smile of the diplomat, and extended her hand. Calicgos took it, closing his fingers around her slender ones, savoring the simple handshake for what it surely must have been, the last time he would be able to touch her.
"You are in good hands," he said.
"The finest in Azeroth," Jaina said cheerfully. "I wish you every success, Calicos. I know you will find what you are seeking, for your flight and for the whole world. Perhaps, after the battle, if you do not find it, I can be of further help." He swallowed hard, then let her hand fall.
"After the battle, if I do not find it, you shall be the first to know," he said sincerely.
Calicgos strode with more energy than was warranted out of the tower and into an area clear enough for him to transform. He leaped into the sky, extending his senses, willing the cursed focusing iris to slow, to stop, so that he could recover it and return to Jaina. But it would not cooperate, and its rapid speed taunted him as he flapped his wings and sped off in what was probably futile pursuit. Jaina was surprised at Calic's rather abrupt departure, and realized that she'd assumed he would stay and help. But it was not his battle, she reasoned. He probably had already intervened much more than he had originally intended. Charming as he was in his half-elven form, he was, in the end, a dragon. And the dragons did not take sides in the affairs of the younger races. Still, she felt an odd sense of loss. He had become a friend during these tense few days, and she would miss him more than she had expected. She did not have time to brood on his absence, however, as Ronan,
this is
materialized outside
Minecraft's
tower, a scant
Bedrock,
half hour
but
after he had contacted her. And also, true to his word,
Mojang
he did
actually
not
renamed Minecraft Bedrock to Bedrock,
With
so
him were nearly a dozen others, 4 of whom Jaina knew
and
to be
Minecraft
prominent
Java
members of the
Edition
Kirin
is
Tor,
yeah,
if not
Java
members
Edition.
of the council.
Java,
The rest of the
Java
Magi
version got
she did not
demoted.
know, but she certainly recognized Verisa Windrunner. Clearly, she was not going to let her husband be put in harm's way without standing beside him. Jaina gave her a welcoming smile and turned to the Magi. The 4 premier Magi Ronan had selected were Terry Cog, one of the foremost gnome Magi in Dalaran, Amara Leeson, a human mage with long black hair and a pinched-looking face whose cross-expression belied a kind heart, Thodor Windermere, whose massive physical build and roughed-up features would make one think he was a warrior rather than one of the deftest spellcasters Jaina had ever met, and, to her surprise, Thalen Songweaver, a Sunreaver, slender, sharp-featured, and with hair the color of moonlight.
Do you have Minecraft as
I
well?
know many of you.
If you
and
have
look forward
Bedrock,
to getting to know the
Bedrock
rest,
Edition, you can
Jaina
join the
said
server
warmly.
if you want.
And I thank you from my heart for answering my call for aid. Mage Songweaver, I especially thank you for being here. The choice must have been difficult, for you and for Archmage Aethys.
Not as much as you would think, said Songweaver in a husky, pleasant voice. It was my Lord Aethys who cast the deciding vote. Even after being married to an elf, their logic still confounds me, said Ronan.
Verisa gave him a mock glare. Ronan winked at his wife, then turned back to Jaina.
Well, here we are. I need to speak with you privately, Lady Proudmoore, but my colleagues here await instruction.
Let us say rather requests, Jaina said, turning to Turvosh. Turvosh, Kindi, Pained, will you acquaint our guests with the layout of the city and introduce them to Captain Vimes and Captain Evencane? Pained merely nodded. Turvosh said,
It would be an honor. We are most grateful for your aid.
Kindi looked a little stunned, and, for once, seemed to have nothing to say. Jaina watched the group go, then turned to Ronan.
You realize you've irritated a lot of magi, Ronan said without preamble.
I? Jaina was confused.
I know. That's usually my area of expertise,
the red-haired archmage said with a self-deprecating grin.
Some people like to hold grudges. I won't go so far as to say you made enemies during the Third War, but your choices didn't endear you to very many.
What did I do?
It's more what you didn't do. Some in Dalaran feel you abandoned them, when you chose not to work with the Kirin Tor, but struck off on your own.
I wasn't needed there, Jaina replied. I had a different, calling. I went where I felt I could best serve. I had no idea other magi felt insulted by that choice.
It's old grumbling, nothing more, Ronan told her. Some people just like to be cranky. And the main reason it still doesn't sit right with a few of them is because there were more than a few magi who thought that you should have been the future of the council, not a smart-mouthed redhead.
At her shocked expression, he added,
Come now, Jaina. I've heard you say often enough that it's as much a mistake to downplay one's talents as it is to inflate them. I'm good. Damn good. And so are many others in the Kirin Tor. Some of those are here today. But you...
He shook his head admiringly.
You're a fine diplomat, no question. Azeroth owes a lot to you. But even I think you may be squandering your gifts, staying here in Theramore.
Theramore is a nation, one I founded to shine out as a beacon of hope for peace in this world. One I have promised to take care of and protect. I would be but one of many in the Kirin Tor. Here, Jaina gestured at the activity all around them. I can't leave, not now, and probably not ever, Ronan. You know that. Theramore needs me. And whatever you say, I cannot believe that I could better serve Azeroth as one of many magi in the Kirin Tor than I have as a diplomat. He nodded, a bit mournfully, it seemed to her.
You are Theramore, he said in agreement. More than I or anyone can be the Kirin Tor. This world is in a sad, sad state, Jaina. It's not been allowed to recover. First, the war against Malagos and the Blues, then fighting that forgive me, the Lich King, cost so many lives. And then Azeroth itself practically cracks in half. No disrespect to your efforts, but I don't think that either the Horde or the Alliance would know what to do with peace if it bit them.
Jaina knew that Ronan did not mean his comments as a criticism. He was merely lamenting, as did she, the fact that Azeroth and its denizens had been forced to endure so many catastrophes, so much violence. And yet, what he said galvanized her, as it struck far too close. Was she wasting her time? Hadn't she said as much to Goel, not so long ago, that she feared her words were falling on deaf ears? What she said came back to her. It seems as if I'm struggling through mud simply to be heard, let alone actually listened to. It's difficult to try to be a diplomat and work for real, solid results when the other side won't acknowledge reason anymore. I feel like a crow cawing in the field. I wonder if it's just wasted breath. Kalagos, too, had expressed the same thing.
Why are you not in Dalaran?
he'd asked her.
Why are you here, standing between swamp and ocean, between horde and alliance?
Because someone has to, she'd answered. And because she believed she had the ability to succeed as a diplomat.
If you believe that, and I'm not saying you're wrong, why are you trying so very hard to convince yourself?
Had she been doing the wrong thing in the wrong place? Jaina forced the thought back. Now was not the time to get lost in regrets. Now was the time to act, to defend her people from the battle that was quite literally on the horizon. I must see my people safe first, she said to Ronan. Not even I can talk of peace